Where does great performance really come from? Our question. Your answer is extremely important because, as I say, we all carry around these deep-seated views. If what we believe is the answer, if we are carrying around the correct answer, that's great. We will manage ourselves properly. We will help those around us to achieve all they can achieve. We will help our kids to achieve all they can achieve. But if we are carrying around a mistaken answer to this question, then none of those things will happen. We will not achieve what we might. Those around us at work will not. Our kids will not. So the answer we carry around, as it says, is extremely important. So let's get to the answer. It ain't so much the things we don't know that get us into trouble. It's the things we know that just ain't so. And when it comes to great performance, most of us know a lot of things that just ain't so. For example, where does it come from? Well, we would all say that hard work is part of where it comes from. And it's true that great performers do all seem to work really, really hard. And yet, that cannot be the real answer. For one thing, if we look around, we all know lots of people who work really, really hard. And they're wonderful people, conscientious, hardworking, great people. But they're not world-class great performers. And in fact, there's research on this, which shows that most people get better at whatever they do early, and then they plateau, and though they may work very hard for a long time, they do not get much better. And so the hard work part doesn't really pan out as an answer to our question. Now, of course, a lot of us would also say massive IQ and memory. And it's true that a lot of great performers do seem to be really, really smart. And yet this can't be the correct answer either. For one thing, we all know plenty of people who are actually really good performers, really terrific performers, who, you know, frankly are not the sharpest tool in the shed, right? And at the same time, we know brilliant people who have not achieved very much. And there's research on this as well. For example, some researchers looked at a group of chess players who had attained the level of international master, an extremely high level, and all of us would say those are the brainiest people in the world, international master chess players. Well, the researchers found that in that group were people with IQs below 100, that is below average. They weren't incredibly brilliant people, they were incredibly good at playing that particular game. So it isn't exactly this either. And then there's what most of us believe most deeply, which is innate talent. A gift that we are born with or not, that we bring into this world to do something fairly specific. And yet even that can't really be the right answer. The person in the picture here is a kid named Ferruccio Burco, and I put him up there because you never heard of him, and I never heard of him either until I started doing work in this area. And he was a prodigy symphony conductor in Italy a long time ago. He's 9 years old in the picture. He's there because he followed the trajectory that most child prodigies follow. Not all, but most, which is he did not become a world-class great adult performer. And similarly, when you look at people who did become world-class great adult performers, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, you could not tell by looking at them in their early lives which ones were going to be the greats and which ones were not. So even this, which is what most of us really believe, can't be quite the right answer. So what is the right answer? Well, what I'm going to tell you is not my opinions. There's been 30 years of good research on this now. And that's what we've learned, and that's what we're going to talk about, because it really does answer the question. For starters, who's this? Yes, so the American Men chorus, Jerry Rice. And the picture shows him doing what he did better than anyone in the history of football, which is catch the football. Now, we argue about sports a lot. It's fun, but nobody argues about this. He was the greatest receiver in the history of the game. Why? Well, there's no argument about that either. He practiced harder and longer than anyone in that position, or maybe any position, ever did. 6 days a week, all year, during the season, during the off season, at an intensity that has rarely been matched. Other NFL players would sometimes join him on his workouts, and many of them could not finish. Sometimes they'd get sick before they finished. And he worked on exactly the things he needed to work on to be a great receiver. Now, there's a lot of wisdom, a lot of lessons in that, but he's only one story. To a scientist, he's an anecdote. He's not data, right? So let's look at data of a completely different kind in a completely different field. This is called the High School of the Arts in Berlin. They call it a high school, but we'd call it a college. Kids go there at age 18, graduate at 21 or 22. And the most elite musicians in the world, a lot of them, go to this institution. Researchers conducted one of the foundational studies in the field at this place. They decided to look at the violinists here. They had the instructors classify the violinists into 3 groups. The first group at the top were the ones who at this stage clearly were going to become really top-ranked violinists, go to work for top orchestras, Berlin Philharmonic, New York Philharmonic, or even become soloists. Second group were the students who were on track to become professional violinists. They could make their living playing in an orchestra, but they weren't going to be at the top of the heap. And then the third group were in a completely different program. Those were the ones who were not going to make a living performing, but were going to make a living teaching in high schools and stuff like that. The researchers then investigated these violinists more thoroughly than you can imagine, had them fill out diaries, interviewed them, their parents, their teachers. They collected every bit of data they could find on these violinists. They found only one difference that was statistically significant. They'd all started playing about the same age. In school at this place, they were all devoting about the same total hours to their study. The only statistically significant difference was total lifetime hours of what the researchers called deliberate practice. That's not what you and I think of as practice, but what they called deliberate practice. And the differences were striking, okay? So that Group A at age 18 had accumulated about 7,500 hours on average. Group B about 5,000 hours. Group C about 3,500 hours on average. And this is at age 18. By the time they graduated at 21 or 22, Group A had accumulated about 10,000 hours. So you've heard that 10,000 hours is what it takes to become really great at something. This is the study from which that number came. Notice, by the way, it's not 10,000 hours of work. It's 10,000 hours of this particular specific activity that they called deliberate practice. That's what distinguished the great ones from the rest. Okay, if that turned out to be what it's all about, then what is deliberate practice? We got to know that. As I said, it's very specific, and it's pretty simple. Here's what it is. First, it is designed specifically to improve performance. That is, it is designed for you at this moment in your development, and it will change as you develop. Second, and this is really the heart of it, it pushes you just beyond your current abilities. It doesn't push you way beyond your current abilities because then you're simply lost. And it doesn't allow you to operate within your current abilities because then you don't grow. It constantly pushes you just beyond your current abilities. It can be repeated a lot The researchers didn't know when they first observed this that it would turn out that brain science is the reason for this. They find that when you repeat something at high volume, it actually reinforces the channels, the circuits in your brain. And it includes continual feedback. You can't know how you're doing if you don't get told, so you can't get better. So continual feedback. That's what it is. The research has since been replicated in all kinds of fields with all kinds of performers. And what it shows is that this is what distinguishes the great performers. They do this, typically for hours a day, for years on end.